For much of the modern era, the US dollar has reigned supreme, often described as the king of currencies. It's been the backbone of international trade, the primary reserve currency for central banks, and the anchor of global finance. This dominance has afforded the United States unprecedented economic leverage, giving it the power to influence economies worldwide. However, the tides are shifting as nations increasingly explore alternatives to the dollar, motivated by a range of factors. Notably, the weaponization of the dollar by the US itself. The dollar's dominant position in global finance traces back to the Bretton Woods Conference of 1944, which established the US dollar as the global reserve currency. Backed by gold, the dollar became the linchpin of the international financial system, with other countries pegging their currencies to it. Even after the gold standard ended in 1971, the dollar continued to wield influence due to the strength of the US economy and financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank, which the United States largely controls. This era of dollar supremacy has given the US a significant geopolitical advantage. Around $1 trillion in US dollar notes circulate outside the United States, and the dollar is involved in the majority of all foreign exchange transactions, making up more than half of global currency reserves. For decades, these data underscored the dollar's indispensability. But in recent years, cracks have begun to appear, with growing resistance from major economies eager to loosen the dollar's stranglehold on global finance. Recently, nations around the world have started seeking alternatives to the dollar. This shift became particularly evident at the BRICS Summit in Kazan, Russia, where a symbolic BRICS banknote was unveiled, representing the desire of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa to explore non-dollar transactions. This development wasn't merely symbolic, it was part of a broader, intensifying movement toward a multipolar economic system. Countries are increasingly moving to direct trade in their own currencies, avoiding dollar dependency altogether. China and Brazil struck a landmark agreement allowing the Chinese yuan and Brazilian real to replace the dollar in their trade transactions, which reached a staggering $181.53 billion in 2023 alone. India is also advancing the rupee's global presence by facilitating trade settlements in its currency. Banks from over 22 countries have opened special accounts in India to enable rupee trade, underscoring the demand for dollar alternatives. China has taken ambitious steps to internationalize its yuan, securing agreements with 41 countries to use it in trade, amounting to a massive $600 billion. India's Reserve Bank initiated similar policies, encouraging the rupee's use in global settlements. This strategic push by the world's largest economies has catalyzed a trend that even oil-rich nations like Russia, Iran, and Venezuela are beginning to embrace, as they too shift away from the petrodollar and explore partnerships with China and India. At the core of this shift is the perceived weaponization of the dollar by the US. In recent years, the US has frequently leveraged its currency as a tool for imposing sanctions and exerting control. For example, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the US imposed sweeping financial sanctions on Russia, isolating it from the international financial system and freezing its dollar reserves. Moscow was also cut off from the SWIFT payment system, illustrating how reliant countries are on the US-dominated financial infrastructure and how vulnerable that reliance can make them. This isn't the first time the US has used the dollar to pursue geopolitical objectives. In 2021, after the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan, the US seized Afghanistan's dollar reserves, an act that turned heads across the global financial community. Many countries now view dollar dependency as a risk to their economic sovereignty. The more the US wields the dollar as a tool of foreign policy, the more it drives other countries to explore alternatives, effectively undermining its own currency's long-term dominance. The anti-dollar movement is not limited to a few dissenting nations. Across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, countries are increasingly pursuing dollar-free trade arrangements. Kenya has begun using its local currency, the shilling, to pay for oil imports, bypassing the dollar entirely. Meanwhile, Southeast Asian nations are also exploring mechanisms to reduce dollar reliance amid growing concerns over the volatility of US monetary policies and political instability. The list of nations challenging dollar dominance continues to expand as they seek greater financial independence. While the dollar remains entrenched in global finance, the shift away from it is unmistakable. The question isn't if, but when the dollar's dominance will erode. As more countries solidify their partnerships in local currencies, they effectively reduce the dollar's role in global trade. Although the transition to a post-dollar world will take time, its early signs are already here. The emergence of the BRICS coalition's banknote, for instance, signifies a powerful symbolic departure from dollar reliance. With China at the forefront, securing bilateral trade agreements and oil deals in yuan, and India pushing for a globalized rupee, the foundation for a multipolar currency system is forming. Even Latin American countries like Brazil and Argentina are discussing a shared South American currency that could one day pose a significant challenge to the dollar in regional trade. A gradual reduction in dollar influence is likely, rather than a swift collapse. This isn't only about economics, it's about nations reclaiming their economic agency and reducing their vulnerability to American policy swings. The push for a diversified financial system aligns with a broader geopolitical shift away from US-centric alliances and institutions. The rise of alternative currencies like the yuan, the rupee, and potentially new regional currencies represents a significant turning point in the global financial landscape. The US dollar's hegemony is fading as countries, weary of its weaponization, seek self-sufficiency in their trade and finance. While the dollar will likely remain an essential player in global economics for years to come, its King of Currencies title is under threat. As new financial alliances and currency alternatives gain traction, the world is inching closer to an era where the dollar's influence may finally wane.